The Bankrupt Millionaire. Let the young beggar spend the night in his office, and when he returned in the morning, he was shocked by what he saw. The cold July wind lashed against the windows of Thompson and Associates, located in the heart of the historic district of Chicago. William Thompson, 35, watched the relentless rain as his fingers drummed on the latest bank notice. The words delinquency and final warnings seemed to leap off the page, reminding him of the difficult situation he faced to keep his father Edward's legacy alive. The accounting firm, once a city landmark, now struggled to stay relevant in an increasingly digitalized and competitive market. The old wooden walls held stories of decades of dedication, ever since his father had founded the establishment in 1980. William ran his hand over the golden plaque on the wall, which read Edward Thompson, Accountant of the Year 1995, one of the many achievements his father had earned before his sudden passing the previous year. Emily, his secretary of 15 years, gently knocked on the office door. "Mr. William, you need to see this. The storm is getting worse, and there's a young woman sleeping at the building's entrance. She's been there for hours, and with this cold..." Her voice carried genuine concern, a trait that made her more than just an employee, but a loyal friend to the firm. William rose from his worn leather chair, a relic from his father, and walked to the window overlooking the building's entrance. Through the fogged glass, he could make out a figure huddled by the door, shielding herself as best she could from the biting wind. Without a second thought, he grabbed his umbrella and descended the stairs of the old building. As he approached, he noticed the young woman couldn't have been more than 20. She wore simple, worn-out clothes and clutched an old backpack as if her life depended on it. Her long, dark hair was soaked and she was visibly shivering. "Hey, are you okay?" William asked, cautiously stepping closer so as not to startle her. The young woman lifted her face, revealing deep brown eyes and an expression that mixed fear and distrust. "I'm just sheltering from the rain," she replied in a hoarse voice, already preparing to stand. "I'll be on my way." "You don't have to go," William said, surprising himself with the quickness of his response. "It's freezing, and the storm is only going to get worse. Why don't you come upstairs for a hot coffee?" The distrust in her eyes deepened, but the bitter cold and the genuine concern in William's voice seemed to convince her. With slow and calculated movements, she stood up, still clutching her backpack. "My name is William Thompson," he introduced himself, maintaining a respectful distance as he guided her into the building. "I own the accounting office on the second floor." "Sophia," she replied simply, her eyes scanning the surroundings with a mix of curiosity and caution. In the office, Emily had already prepared fresh coffee and set aside some clean towels she kept for emergencies. The secretary had that kind of foresight that only years of experience provide. Sophia accepted the towel and the steaming cup with a barely audible "thank you." As the young woman warmed up, William noticed something curious. Her eyes scanned the spreadsheets displayed on one of the tables with particular interest, and her fingers moved slightly as if she were doing mental calculations. "Do you like numbers?" he asked, trying to start a conversation. Sophia hesitated for a moment before answering. "I've always liked math. At the orphanage, there was a teacher. He said I had a special talent for calculations." The mention of the orphanage helped William better understand the young woman's situation. Before he could ask more questions, a particularly loud thunderclap made the lights flicker, and through the window, it was clear that the storm had turned into a full-blown tempest. "You can't go back out in this weather," declared Emily, her maternal instincts kicking in. "Mr. William, the old file storage room has been empty since we digitized everything. We could..." William finished the thought. "Turn it into a temporary room?" A knowing smile appeared on his face. "Exactly what I was thinking." Sophia seemed about to protest, but another thunderclap made her reconsider. It would just be for tonight," she murmured, still clutching her backpack as if it were her only safe haven. What none of them knew at that moment was that stormy night would mark the beginning of a profound transformation in their lives. While Emily organized the old storage room with surprising agility and William searched for extra blankets in his closet, no one could have imagined that Sophia's arrival would be just the first in a series of events that would forever change the fate of Thompson and Associates. Across town, in a luxurious office in the most upscale area of Chicago, a man watched the same storm through a panoramic window. Daniel Harris, William's former college friend and now his declared rival, held in his hands an envelope containing information he planned to use to destroy the Thompson legacy. In his mind, he nurtured a resentment that had grown over the years, fueled by a story from the past that he refused to forget. The next morning, Thompson and Associates awoke to a different day. The storm had passed, but it had left its marks on the city. William arrived early, as usual, and found Sophia already awake, methodically organizing some files that had been misplaced during the storm. "Good morning," she said timidly, but with more confidence than the night before. "I hope I haven't caused any trouble. I organized some files I saw were out of place." William approached and observed her work. The files weren't just organized, they followed a surprisingly efficient classification system. "Do you have experience with document organization?" "At the orphanage, I used to help Professor Johnson in the library. He taught me about filing systems, but mostly about numbers. He said math is like music, it has its own rhythm and harmony." A small smile appeared on her face as she mentioned her old mentor. Before they could continue the conversation, Emily hurried into the office. "Mr. William, we have a problem. The Internal Revenue Service just sent a notice about an alleged irregularity in one of last year's filings." William felt his stomach drop. He took the document from Emily's hands and began to read. As his eyes scanned the lines, Sophia quietly approached, her gaze fixed on the numbers presented in the document. "There's something wrong with these calculations," she murmured, almost to herself. "The progression doesn't make sense." William and Emily looked at her surprised. Sophia, realizing she had spoken out loud, blushed slightly but continued, Can I take a closer look?" After a moment of hesitation, William handed her the document. Sophia sat down at one of the empty tables and began jotting notes on a piece of paper, her fingers moving with impressive agility as she performed complex mental calculations. "Here," she pointed out after a few minutes, "someone deliberately altered these numbers. If you compare them with the original documents, you'll notice a manipulation in the decimal places. It's subtle, but it's there." William quickly checked the original files and realized she was right. Someone had deliberately tampered with the information sent to the Internal Revenue Service, but who would have access and an interest in harming the firm in this way? The answer came in the form of a phone call. The phone rang and Emily answered, her expression changing as she recognized the voice on the other end of the line. "Mr. William, it's Mr. Daniel Harris." William took the phone, his body tense as he heard the name of his old college friend. Daniel had become one of the most influential accountants in the city, but his professional rise was marked by stories of questionable practices and intense rivalries. "William, old friend," Daniel's voice sounded falsely cordial. "I heard you're having some trouble with the IRS. What a shame. Your father would be disappointed. What do you want, Daniel?" William kept his voice controlled, though his fist was clenched on the table. "Just offering a friendly solution. Sell the firm to me. For the sake of your father's memory, I can make an offer. A reasonable one." The mention of his father made William's blood boil. "My father built this place with honesty and dedication, Daniel. Values you never understood." "Ah, William, always so idealistic, just like your father." Daniel's voice took on a darker tone. "But idealism doesn't pay the bills, does it? Think about my offer. You have a week." Before William could respond, Daniel hung up. The office was plunged into a heavy silence, broken only by the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Sophia, who had been observing the entire scene, approached hesitantly. "Mr. William, is there anything else in these documents I can review? Maybe I can help." William looked at the young woman, noticing for the first time a fierce determination behind her fragile appearance. Emily, who knew well the signs of when her boss was about to make an important decision, waited expectantly. "Sophia," William began, a plan starting to form in his mind. "Would you like a job? We need someone with your talent for numbers here." Sophia's eyes widened, shining with a mix of surprise and hope. Before she could respond, the office door opened, revealing a woman in her 40s, wearing a formal blazer and carrying a badge. "Good morning," she introduced herself in a firm yet gentle voice. "I am Inspector Olivia Martinez. I am investigating a series of complaints against this establishment." The morning sun, which had finally broken through the storm clouds, illuminated the office through the old windows, creating a play of light and shadow that seemed to symbolize the crucial moment they were experiencing. At that instant, none of them could have imagined how their lives would intertwine in the events that were about to unfold. Inspector Olivia Martinez settled into the meeting room of Thompson and Associates, her attentive eyes observing every detail of the environment. The impeccable organization of the files, the aroma of fresh coffee, and the old photographs on the walls told the story of an establishment with deep roots in the community. "Mr. Thompson," Olivia began, her voice professional but not hostile, "we have received several complaints about alleged tax irregularities at this firm. Under normal circumstances, this would be a case for the Internal Revenue Service, but there are elements that suggest a more complex situation." William remained calm, even as he felt the weight of concern on his shoulders. "Inspector, we are available to clarify any questions. This firm has 40 years of history built on honesty." Sophia, who remained in a corner of the room organizing documents, couldn't help but cast curious glances at the inspector. There was something in the woman's demeanor that conveyed not only authority, but also a genuine pursuit of the truth. "Mr. William," Emily gently interrupted, entering the room with an old folder, "I found the records you asked for regarding the old partnership with Mr. Harris." Olivia raised an eyebrow upon hearing the name. "Daniel Harris? Interesting. This name has been coming up frequently in my recent investigations." William hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Daniel and I studied together in college. He and my father had a business partnership 15 years ago, but it ended on troubled terms." "Could you elaborate?" Olivia asked, her notepad ready. Sophia, who was now reviewing some old documents, suddenly looked up. "These numbers, there's something strange here." She approached the table with a folder yellowed by time. "In the records of the old partnership, there are discrepancies in the balances, as if someone had manipulated the data," Clara completed, now genuinely interested. "Miss Sophia," the young woman replied, slightly shy under the inspector's intense gaze. "I have a knack for numbers." Clara observed Sophia with growing interest. There was something special about that young woman, a mix of fragility and sharpness that caught her attention. "Could you show me what you found?" As Sophia explained her findings, William watched the scene with a mix of pride and concern. In just 2 days, the young woman he had taken in during a storm was becoming a key piece in the puzzle surrounding his office. The reception phone rang, and Emily answered promptly. Her face paled slightly before she turned to William. "Mr. William, it's Mr. Torres, that old client of your father's. He says it's urgent." Anthony Torres was one of the office's oldest clients, a respected businessman who had always maintained a friendly relationship with Edward Thompson. William picked up the phone, noticing that Clara was watching every move with professional attention. "Mr. Torres, what a pleasant surprise," William greeted. "William, my boy." Torres' deep and familiar voice sounded concerned. "We need to talk in person. I received a visit, a disturbing one from Daniel Harris. He's asking questions about your father, about the office. There's something you need to know, something your father confided in me before he left." William felt a chill run down his spine. "Can we meet today? At Cafe Nostalgia at 4 in the afternoon, and William, come alone." After hanging up, William noticed his hands were trembling slightly. Olivia, who hadn't missed a single detail of the conversation, approached. "Mr. Thompson, as an investigator, I must warn you that secret meetings during an investigation can be problematic." "Inspector," William replied, choosing his words carefully, "Anthony Torres is practically family. If he has information about my father—" Olivia sighed, a small smile forming on her lips. "Then I suggest I accompany you discreetly. After all, I can't allow a citizen under investigation to get involved in potentially compromising situations." Sophia, who had turned her attention back to the documents, looked up again. "There's one more thing," she said, her voice gaining confidence. "In the latest records of the partnership between Mr. Harris and your father, there's a coded note. It looks like coordinates or an account number," suggested Olivia, stepping closer to examine the document. Not exactly," Sophia furrowed her brow, focused. "It's more like a filing system. Professor Johnson taught me about that at the orphanage. Some old companies used specific codes for confidential documents." William felt his heart race. His father had always been methodical and cautious. If he had left any encoded message, it must have been something of utmost importance. The clock on the wall showed 11:30 in the morning, and the sun now shone brightly through the office windows. Emily brought another round of coffee, her silent yet comforting presence filling the room with the familiar aroma. Olivia closed her notebook and stood up. "Mr. Thompson, we'll continue this conversation at the cafe at 4 o'clock. It wasn't a request, but it didn't sound like an order either. And Miss Sophia, I'd like you to keep analyzing these documents. Your gift for numbers might be more valuable than you realize." As the inspector headed toward the door, William noticed something in her gaze that hadn't been there when she arrived. A glimmer of determination that went beyond professional duty. Olivia Martinez seemed to have found something that deeply intrigued her, something that made her want to uncover not just the truth about the allegations, but also the mysteries surrounding Thompson and Associates. Café Nostalgia was a traditional establishment in the historic center of Chicago, known for its homemade sweets and decor reminiscent of the 1950s. At exactly 4 in the afternoon, William walked through its old wooden doors, the soft chime announcing his arrival. Anthony Torres was already waiting for him at a discreet table in the back of the cafe. The businessman, who must have been the same age his father would be today, looked more worn out than William remembered. At a nearby table, Olivia Martinez pretended to read a book, her presence almost imperceptible to anyone not looking for her. "William, my boy," Torres stood up for a warm embrace. "You look more like Edward every day." William sat down, noticing that the businessman kept a leather briefcase on the table. "Mr. Torres, what do we need to talk about?" Torres took a sip of his coffee before beginning. "Your father was more than my accountant, William. He was my confidant, my friend. In the last few weeks before his passing, he was deep worried. He had discovered something about Daniel Harris, something that deeply troubled him." In the office, Sophia continued to pore over the old documents, with Emily occasionally bringing more folders from the archives. The young woman had created her own analysis system, using colorful post-its to mark patterns and inconsistencies. "Emily," Sophia called out suddenly, "do you remember how long the partnership between Mr. Thompson and Mr. Harris lasted?" The secretary adjusted her glasses, thoughtful. "It was 3 years, if I'm not mistaken. Daniel was ambitious. He wanted to expand quickly. Mr. Edward preferred a more cautious, more ethical approach to growth." Sophia nodded, confirming something in her notes. "And do you remember any specific clients they lost during that period?" Back at the cafe, Torres opened his briefcase, revealing carefully preserved old documents. Daniel was always obsessed with success, with power. Even in college, he showed a troubling moral flexibility. Edward took him under his wing, believing he could guide him down the right path. "But something went wrong," William added, feeling a knot in his stomach. "Daniel started doing side deals, using the firm's reputation to attract clients. When your father found out, well, the argument was intense. But Edward was a cautious man. He kept records, evidence." Olivia, at her desk, kept her ears attentive while pretending to flip through the pages of her book. Her experience as an investigator told her they were about to uncover something crucial. In the office, Sophia let out a surprised exclamation. "Emily, look at this!" She pointed to a series of seemingly random numbers in the margins of various documents. "These aren't just filing codes, they're cross-references. Mr. Edward created a complex system of parallel documentation." Emily approached, adjusting her glasses again. "My God, all these years I never noticed. He was creating a secret record of all the suspicious activities." Torres lowered his voice, leaning over the table. "Edward discovered that Daniel was involved in a much larger scheme. It wasn't just accounting irregularities, it was..." The sound of breaking dishes in the cafe's kitchen interrupted the conversation, startling everyone. Olivia discreetly checked her phone, where a message from her partner at the precinct flashed. "Be careful. Someone is interfering with the investigation internally." William felt a chill. The pieces were starting to come together, forming an increasingly troubling picture. His father hadn't just uncovered irregularities, he had built an entire case against Daniel Harris. "Mr. Torres," William asked, his voice trembling slightly, "why are you telling me this now?" The businessman sighed deeply. "Because Eduardo came to make me an offer. He wants to buy all my companies, all my properties. It's a seemingly generous offer, but Something's wrong. And then he mentioned his father, mentioned that it would be a shame if the legacy of the Thompsons were tainted. Olivia had heard enough. She discreetly stood up and walked to the restroom, where she made a quick call to her team. Something much bigger than simple tax allegations was at play. In the office, Sophia had organized her findings on a large makeshift board. The patterns were clear now. Dates, amounts, names of shell companies, all connected by an invisible web of numbers and codes that Edward Thompson had left as his final act of justice. "Emily," Sophia called, her voice filled with urgency. "I need to speak with Mr. William immediately. I think I've found something that could change everything." The afternoon sun began to set, painting the sky of Chicago with shades of orange and pink. At Café Nostalgia, Torres handed William an old key. "Your father left this with me, said that one day you'd understand. It's for a safe deposit box at the central bank, box 1547. William held the key as if it were a sacred relic, feeling the weight of the responsibility his father had entrusted to him. Olivia, returning to her table, briefly made eye contact with him, a look that clearly said, "We're in this together." William's phone vibrated. It was a message from Sophia. "Mr. William, I found something in the files. Something big. Your father left a map, a complete record. We need to talk urgently." The afternoon turned into night, and with it the secrets long kept in the shadows began to emerge. The truth, like a night-blooming flower, was about to unfold. The central bank was already closing when William, Olivia, and Sophia arrived. The security guard, recognizing the inspector's identification, allowed them to enter. The private vault section was an austere environment, with cold lighting and security cameras at every corner. "Box 1547, William murmured, his fingers tightening around the old key Torres had given him. Olivia remained alert to any suspicious movement, while Sophia carried her briefcase with the discoveries made in the office archives. "Mr. William," Sophia whispered as they walked down the silent hallway, "those codes your father left, they're not just records, they're like pieces of a puzzle. Each number represents a specific transaction, but when put together, they form a complete map of Harris's activities," Olivia finished, impressed by the young woman's insight. "Your father was brilliant, Mr. Thompson." When they reached box 1547, William felt his hands tremble slightly. The key fit perfectly into the lock, turning with a soft click. Inside the vault, they found a faded blue folder and a sealed envelope with William's name on it. "Dear son," William began reading the letter with a choked voice, "if you're reading this, it means my suspicions were correct. Daniel Harris is not just a dishonest accountant. He built a network of fraud that spans the entire state. But more importantly, he betrayed not only our professional trust, but also the principles we always stood for." Sophia opened the blue folder, her eyes quickly identifying patterns in the documents. "This confirms everything. The codes in the office archives, they're direct references to these documents. Your father created a dual-proof system, keeping half the evidence in the office and half here." Olivia examined the documents with experienced eyes. "This is much bigger than we imagined. Harris isn't just trying to destroy Thompson and Associates. He's trying to erase any trace of his past activities." Back at the office, Emily received an unexpected call. "Thompson and Associates, good evening? Emily?" The voice on the other end was familiar. "This is Isabella from Dr. Edwards' old team. We need to talk about Daniel Harris. There's something you need to know." Emily felt a chill. Isabella had been the lead accountant at the firm during the partnership with Harris, leaving mysteriously right after the split. "Isabella, after all this time, what happened?" "I saw things, Emily. Documents I shouldn't have seen. Doctor, Edward protected me back then, helped me start over in another state. But now he needs to be stopped." At the bank, William continued reading his father's letter. "Son, our firm has always represented more than just numbers. We represented trust, integrity, the dream of helping people build their businesses honestly. Daniel never understood that. For him, numbers were just tools for manipulation." Sophia, who was still analyzing the documents, let out a surprised exclamation. "There's something else here. Look at these receipts. They're donations to the orphanage where I grew up. Professor Johnson, he knew your father, Mr. William." The revelation hit William like a bolt of lightning. His father had not only uncovered Harris's frauds, He had also created a safety net for those who could be affected. The orphanage, Isabella, and likely others they were still unaware of. Olivia received a message on her phone. "Inspector, we've discovered who's interfering with the investigation. Officer Smith has connections to Harris's companies." "Mr. Thompson," Olivia put her phone away, her expression serious, "we need to act fast. With this evidence, we can not only protect your firm, but also expose Harris's entire scheme." William looked at Sophia, who was methodically organizing the evidence, and at Olivia, whose determination to seek justice reminded him so much of the values his father had always stood for. At that moment, he felt that Edward Thompson's legacy was far greater than just an accounting office. "Emily," Isabella continued on the phone, her voice now firmer, "tell William that I still have the backups, all the files Mr. Edward asked me to keep, all the records of the suspicious transactions. I'm returning to Chicago tomorrow." The sun had completely set, and the automatic lights of the bank turned on, casting long shadows down the hallways. William carefully tucked away his father's letter, feeling that every word was a guide for the challenges still to come. "Sophia," he called softly, "I don't think it was a coincidence that you showed up at the office that stormy night. My father, he always said there are no coincidences when it comes to good people finding each other." Olivia watched the scene with a faint smile, realizing she was witnessing not just the unraveling of a complex case, but also the strengthening of bonds that transcended the circumstances that had brought them together. "Mr. William," Sophia replied, her eyes glistening with held-back tears. "Professor Johnson always said that numbers don't lie, and now I understand. He wasn't just talking about math. He was talking about truth, about justice." As they left the bank, each carrying a portion of the evidence that could change everything, William felt a growing certainty. His father's legacy wasn't in the walls of the office or the numbers on the spreadsheets, but in the values he had planted in every person he had touched with his integrity. The next morning dawned with a soft mist covering Chicago, as if the city itself wanted to protect the secrets about to come to light. At the Thompson & Associates office, a small crowd had gathered. William, Sophia, Olivia, Emily, and to everyone's surprise, Isabella, who had arrived on the first flight of the morning. Isabella White was no longer the timid young accountant who had left the office years ago. Now at 45, she carried a briefcase filled with documents and an unshakable determination in her gaze. "When Mr. Edward discovered what was happening," Isabella began, her voice steady despite the emotion, "he called me into his office. Harris was using the firm as a front for a much larger scheme. Shell companies, fake invoices, embezzlement. But the worst was how he manipulated small business owners, honest people who trusted us." Sophia, who was organizing the evidence from the safe, along with the new documents brought by Isabella, noticed increasingly clear patterns. The codes complement each other perfectly. It's as if your father had created a safety net, distributing the evidence among trusted people. Olivia received constant messages on her phone. Her trusted team at the precinct had uncovered more connections between Officer Smith and Harris's companies. "We need to proceed carefully," she warned. "Harris has influential people in his pocket." The office phone rang, causing everyone to freeze for a moment. Emily answered, her face slightly paling. "Mr. William, it's Mr. Harris. He's coming up." William felt his heart race but remained calm. "Olivia, Sophia, Isabella, I trust you. Let's face him together." Daniel Harris entered the office as he always did, impeccably dressed, a confident smile on his lips. His gaze, however, faltered when he saw the group gathered, especially upon recognizing Isabella. "Well, well, what an interesting meeting," he commented, trying to maintain control of the situation. "William, I came personally to make one final offer for the office, for the old friendship with your father." "Don't mention my father," William interrupted, his voice carrying an authority that surprised everyone. "Not after what we've discovered." Harris laughed, but it was a nervous laugh. "Discovered? And what exactly do you think you've discovered?" Sophia stepped forward, spreading some documents on the table. "Mr. Edward's code system, every number, every seemingly innocent note, all part of a meticulous record of his illegal activities." Harris's smile vanished completely. "You have no idea what game you're playing, girl. This is bigger than all of you." "No, Daniel," Isabella interjected, her voice trembling slightly. "It's you who never understood. Edward wasn't just building a case against you. He was protecting people, building a support network for when the truth came out. Olivia stepped closer, her badge gleaming in the morning light. "Mr. Harris, we have enough evidence to prove not only the fraud, but also your attempts at sabotage and intimidation." "You have nothing," Harris exploded, his facade of civility crumbling. "I'm untouchable. I have connections, You have Officer Smith in your pocket," Olivia completed, a satisfied smile on her lips. "No more. Right now, my team is gathering evidence from all your shell companies." Emily, who had been silently observing everything, thought about how proud Edward Thompson would be at that moment. The office he had built with so much love wasn't just a business, it was a symbol of integrity that inspired others to do the right thing. "Mr. William?" Sophia called softly, holding up another document. "Look at this. Your father made regular donations to the orphanage, specifically for Professor Johnson's financial education program. He was building a future, investing in people who could make a difference." William felt tears welling up as he realized the extent of his father's vision. Edward hadn't just foreseen Harris's downfall. He had laid the groundwork for a new beginning, planting seeds of hope in unexpected places. Harris, realizing he was cornered, made one last desperate move. "William, think carefully. I can make you rich. We can be partners, expand the business." "The business is already expanding, Daniel," William replied calmly, "but not your way. We'll continue my father's work, helping honest people grow, supporting the community, making a real difference." Olivia gave a signal, and 2 trusted officers entered the office. "Mr. Harris, you are under investigation. We have a lot to discuss at the station." As Harris was led away, Sophia approached William. "Mr. William, now I understand why Professor Johnson always said numbers have a soul. They're not just digits on a spreadsheet. They're stories, they're lives." The sun had dispersed the morning fog, and light streamed abundantly through the office windows. On the wall, the photo of Edward Thompson seemed to smile with approval, as if he knew his legacy was in good hands. The news of Daniel Harris's arrest spread quickly through the business circles of Chicago. In the weeks that followed, the office of Thompson and Associates became the center of a transformation no one could have predicted. On a particularly hectic morning, William stood by the window of his office, observing the unusual activity in the reception area. Several small business owners, former clients who had distanced themselves out of fear of Harris's threats, were returning, bringing not only their files, but also stories of how Edward Thompson had helped them in the past. "Mr. William," Sophia entered the room carrying a stack of meticulously organized documents. "I've finished analyzing the priority cases. There are 17 companies in urgent need of financial restructuring." William smiled, admiring how the young woman had blossomed in recent weeks. She was no longer the frightened girl who had sought shelter on a stormy night. Now she was a competent and confident professional. "You know, Sophia," he remarked, "I've been thinking, would you like to study accounting? The firm could sponsor your education." Sophia's eyes sparkled with contained emotion. "Mr. William, that would be a dream. Professor Johnson always said I should follow this path. But at the orphanage—" "Then it's settled," William smiled. "In fact, I have a surprise for you. Olivia managed to locate Professor Johnson. He's coming to visit us today." On the other side of the office, Emily and Isabella worked together reorganizing the filing system. Isabella's experience with Edward's codes was proving invaluable in creating a new, even more efficient and transparent method of organization. "I never thought I'd come back," Isabella confessed to Emily as they catalogued old files. "But now, it's as if Dr. Thompson's spirit, Edward was more present than ever." The phone rang and Emily answered with her usual efficiency. "Thompson and Associates. Good morning." "Yes, Inspector Olivia, he's here." Olivia had become a constant presence in the office, even after the official conclusion of the case. Her investigation had uncovered a corruption network much larger than they had imagined, but it had also revealed an even larger network of honest people willing to fight for what was right. "William," Olivia entered the room with a discreet smile, "I have news. The Chamber of Commerce wants you to give a lecture on business ethics next month. Your story is inspiring a lot of people." Before William could respond, they heard a commotion in the reception area. A grey-haired gentleman with thick-framed glasses had arrived, and Sophia ran to hug him, tears of joy in her eyes. "Professor Johnson," she exclaimed, "so you really came." The professor smiled, adjusting his glasses, visibly moved. "Sophia, my dear, when I heard about everything that happened, I had to come in person. Edward was a great friend, you know. He always believed that education and ethics were the most powerful tools to transform lives." William watched the scene, feeling a deep emotion as another piece of the puzzle fell into place. His father had woven a network of kindness and integrity much larger than anyone could have imagined. "Professor," William approached, extending his hand, "it's an honor to meet you. I was thinking, in addition to sponsoring Sophia's studies, we would like to expand the financial education program you were developing at the orphanage." Professor Johnson's eyes lit up. "That would be wonderful. I have so many talented students who just need an opportunity." Olivia, who was observing everything with both professional and personal interest, couldn't help but smile. In his investigations, he had seen the worst of human nature, but there, in that office, he was witnessing the best. "Mr. William," Emily called from the door, "the renovation team is here. They want to confirm the plans for the new training room." The office was undergoing a physical transformation to match its evolution. The old file room, where Sophia had slept that first night, was being converted into a modern space for classes and training. "Professor," Sophia said, her voice filled with emotion, "you need to see the new systems we've developed. We combined your teaching methods with Mr. Edward's codes to create something truly special." As Professor Johnson followed Sophia to explore the office's innovations, William felt a familiar presence by his side. Olivia had approached quietly, her gaze conveying more than just professional admiration. "You know, William," she remarked softly, "when I started this investigation, I was looking for criminals. I ended up finding heroes." William smiled, observing the activity in the office. Sophia enthusiastically explaining the systems to her former mentor, Isabella and Emily, organizing the new files, old and new clients sharing stories in the reception area. "We're not heroes, Olivia," he replied. "We're just people trying to do the right thing like my father always taught." The afternoon sun streamed through the office windows, illuminating the photo of Edward on the wall. His serene smile seemed brighter now, as if approving every new direction his legacy was taking. The auditorium of the Chamber of Commerce was packed that spring afternoon. William adjusted the microphone, feeling the weight of the audience's expectant gazes. In the front row, Sophia, Olivia, Emily, Isabella, and Professor Johnson smiled encouragingly. "When my father founded Thompson and Associates," William began, his voice steady and clear, "he had a dream bigger than simply creating a successful business. He wanted to build a place where integrity and competence walked hand in hand." In the audience, many familiar faces nodded in agreement. Former clients, new partners, and even some ex-employees of Daniel Harris who had sought out the office after the revelations, looking to restart their careers ethically. "But the true legacy of Edward Thompson," William continued, "isn't in the numbers or the impeccable records. It's in the lives he touched, the opportunities he created, the seeds of hope he planted." Sophia, seated beside Professor Johnson, felt her heart overflowing with gratitude. In just a few months, her life had completely changed. From a directionless young woman, she was now an accounting student and a junior coordinator of the office's new financial education program. Olivia watched William with a mix of pride and admiration. Her investigation had officially ended, but her involvement with the office and its principals was just beginning. The frequent, professional visits had turned into something deeper, a connection that went beyond duty. "Today," William continued, "I want to officially announce the creation of the Edward Thompson Foundation, a project that will expand the work we were already doing, offering financial education, accounting support, and mentorship to small entrepreneurs and young talents." A murmur of approval swept through the auditorium. In the audience, Anthony Torres smiled, moved. The businessman had become one of the initiative's main supporters, determined to honor the memory of his friend. "Professor Johnson will be our educational director," William announced, prompting a round of applause. "His experience and dedication will be essential in shaping the next generation of ethical and competent professionals." The professor adjusted his glasses, visibly moved. His work at the orphanage had only been the beginning. Now, with the resources and structure of the foundation, he could reach many more young people like Sophia. Emily nudged Isabella discreetly, pointing to a group of young accountants in the audience. "Are those the new interns you selected?" Isabella nodded, proud. As the office's training coordinator, she now had the opportunity to shape new professionals, ensuring that the values of integrity were passed on. "And none of this would be possible," William continued, his voice slightly trembling, "without the extraordinary people who joined us on this journey. A talented young woman who showed us that numbers have a soul. A courageous inspector who proved that justice and compassion can walk hand in hand. A dedicated team that turned challenges into opportunities." Olivia felt her cheeks flush slightly. Her relationship with William had blossomed naturally, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. At the precinct, she was now known not only for her investigative skills, but also for her work in raising awareness about business ethics. "The office of Thompson & Associates is not just a business," William concluded. "It's a family that grows every day, united by the desire to make a difference, to build a more just and ethical world." After the lecture, as people gathered in small groups to chat, Sophia approached William with an envelope in her hands. "Mr. William," she called timidly, "I wanted to show you something. These are the results of my first semester at college." William opened the envelope, his smile widening as he saw the exemplary grades. "Sophia, this is wonderful. My father would be so proud." "Our father," Sophia corrected gently, surprising William. "Professor Johnson told me it was Mr. Edward who paid for my studies at the orphanage anonymously. He was already my father long before I knew." Olivia approached the group, her eyes shining with affection. "So is this officially a family reunion?" William discreetly took her hand, feeling the engagement ring they had chosen together the week before. "Family," he repeated, looking at the group forming around him. "Sophia, Olivia, Emily, Isabella, Professor Johnson. That's exactly what we are." The afternoon sun streamed through the auditorium windows, creating a golden effect that seemed to bless the moment. On the wall, a new plaque would soon be unveiled. "Edward Thompson Foundation, building a future of integrity and opportunity." Autumn painted the streets of Chicago with golden hues as Thompson & Associates completed 6 months of its transformation. The training room, once a simple storage space for files, now buzzed with the energy of 20 young students, all participants in the first cycle of the Foundation's financial education program. Sophia was at the front of the class, leading a lesson on balance sheet analysis with the confidence of someone who had found her true calling. Her eyes sparkled as she explained complex concepts in a simple and engaging way, just as Professor Johnson had done with her years ago. "And remember," she concluded her explanation, "numbers aren't just digits on a spreadsheet. They're stories of people, dreams and possibilities." At the door of the room, William watched the scene with pride. Olivia, who had arrived quietly, intertwined her fingers with his. "She's amazing," Olivia whispered. "Did you know 3 of my colleagues from the precinct signed up for the next cycle of compliance lectures?" The impact of the Edward Thompson Foundation's work had spread far beyond initial expectations. Business people, freelancers, and even public servants sought out the lectures and workshops, drawn not only by the technical knowledge, but primarily by the philosophy of integrity that permeated every activity. Emily hurried into the hallway, her eyes shining with excitement. "Mr. William, the article is ready." The Business Review wants to publish the piece about the Foundation in the next issue. The journalist responsible for the article had spent 2 weeks observing the office's routine, fascinated by the story of transformation and renewal. More than a simple business profile, the piece had become a study on how ethical values could revolutionize a business and impact an entire community. In the late afternoon after the last class, the team gathered in William's office for a small celebration. Isabella had brought a homemade cake, her grandmother's recipe, a tradition that was becoming common at Friday meetings. "I have an announcement to make," William began, his voice filled with emotion. "The State Accounting Board has approved our proposal. The Foundation's mentorship program will be officially recognized as a complementary activity for accounting students." Sophia, who was serving coffee to everyone, nearly dropped her cup in surprise. It was the realization of a dream she didn't even know she had until a few months ago. "But there's more," William continued, exchanging a knowing glance with Olivia. "The Foundation has been selected for a pilot project with the Department of Justice. We will develop a recovery program for companies that have been victims of fraud, offering technical and administrative support. Professor Johnson, who was attending the meeting via video call from the orphanage where he was now implementing an advanced branch of the program, applauded enthusiastically. Edward would be thrilled. This is exactly what he always dreamed of, turning knowledge into an instrument of social justice. Isabella raised her cup in an impromptu toast. To the memory of Mr. Edward, who taught us that integrity isn't just a pretty word, but a force for transformation. And to the future, Olivia added, her gaze sweeping across every face in the room. A future we are building together, one number, one story, one life at a time. Sophia, seated near the window, watched the activity on the street below. Young executives, small business owners, students, all part of a community that was relearning the value of ethics in business. Her fingers drummed softly on her class folder, where she kept the first assignment she had done for Edward Thompson, without even knowing it, the calculations she had scribbled down on that stormy night. William approached her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "A penny for your thoughts." "I was thinking," she replied with a soft smile, "about how sometimes numbers guide us to where we need to be. Like an equation that seems complex but has an elegant solution waiting to be discovered." Emily, who was organizing some documents on her desk, looked up curiously. "You know what's most amazing? How everything connects." Professor Johnson, who was inspired by Mr. Edward. Sophia, who came to us as if destiny had precisely calculated the moment. Olivia, who came to investigate a crime and found a family. The late afternoon sun streamed through the office windows, creating a golden glow that seemed to embrace the entire room. On the wall, the photo of Edward Thompson appeared to smile with even more satisfaction, as if he could see every seed he had planted, blossoming in ways that surpassed even his most optimistic dreams. Spring had arrived in Chicago, bringing not only flowers but also a wave of renewal. The office of Thompson & Associates was preparing for a historic moment, the graduation of the first class from the Foundation's Financial Education Program. The event would be held in the Chamber of Commerce Auditorium, the same place where, months earlier, William had announced the creation of the Foundation. Now the space was decorated with flowers and banners, celebrating not just an academic achievement, but a social transformation. Sophia, wearing a navy blue gown as the class speaker, reviewed her speech one last time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from contained emotion. Beside her, Professor Johnson adjusted his own gown, proud as a father. "Remember our first meeting at the orphanage?" he asked softly. "You were just a shy girl who loved playing with numbers." Sophia smiled, recalling those days that now seemed so distant. "You told me that numbers have the power to transform lives. I didn't fully understand it back then, but now..." In the front row of the auditorium, William and Olivia chatted with Anthony Torres, who had become one of the Foundation's greatest supporters. The businessman had created a scholarship fund in memory of Edward Thompson, ensuring that more young talents would have the same opportunity as Sophia. "Have you seen the latest survey?" Torres commented excitedly. The tax compliance rate among companies that participated in the program increased by 80%. "It's a quiet revolution." Isabella, who was coordinating the event's organization, approached the group with Emily. The two had become an inseparable duo, perfectly complementing each other's skills in managing the foundation. "Everything is ready," Isabella announced. "The certificates, the honors. Oh, and that special surprise we prepared." William nodded, feeling the weight of the small envelope in his pocket. It was a surprise he had carefully planned with Olivia, something that would forever change the future of the firm and the foundation. The auditorium began to fill up. In addition to the graduates and their families, there were representatives from various institutions, universities interested in replicating the program, business leaders wanting to implement ethical principles in their companies, and even an international delegation that had come to learn about the project. When Sophia took the stage for her speech, silence fell immediately. Her presence, once shy and hesitant, now radiated confidence and purpose. "When I think about numbers," she began, her voice clear and firm, "I don't just see calculations and statistics. I see bridges connecting people, dreams taking shape, stories transforming. A year ago, I was just a young woman without direction, seeking shelter from a storm. Today I stand before you not just as a professional, but as someone who has learned that the true value of a number lies in the impact it can have on people's lives. In the audience, many eyes filled with tears. Each person there had their own story of transformation, their own connection to the legacy Edward Thompson had started. After the graduation ceremony, William asked for everyone's attention for a special announcement. With Olivia by his side, he opened the envelope he had been carrying. "Today we don't just celebrate the graduation of an extraordinary class," he began. "We also celebrate the beginning of a new era for Thompson and Associates. Starting today, the firm will become a cooperative of professionals committed to ethics and social responsibility. And I am pleased to announce that Sophia will be our first partner coordinator of the educational program." The surprise and joy on Sophia's face were indescribable. Professor Johnson was the first to hug her, followed by an emotional Emily and an Isabella, who couldn't hold back her tears. "But there's more," Olivia continued the announcement. "The precinct has officially partnered with the foundation. We're creating a center for fraud prevention and study, combining technical expertise with social commitment." The auditorium erupted in applause. Amid the celebration, Sophia found a moment to approach the portrait of Edward Thompson, which had been prominently displayed on the stage. "Thank you," she whispered to the photograph, "for planting the seeds that brought us here." William and Olivia joined her, followed by Professor Johnson, Emily, Isabella, and Anthony Torres. Together they gazed at the portrait of the man who had started it all, not just with numbers and calculations, but with a vision of a more just and ethical world. "You know what's most beautiful?" Olivia remarked softly. "How a simple stormy night can change the fate of so many people." The afternoon sun streamed through the auditorium windows, creating a spectacle of light that seemed to dance around the group. Outside, Chicago pulsed with its characteristic energy, but now with a special touch of hope and renewal, thanks to a legacy that continued to grow and transform lives. One number, one dream, one person at a time. The big day had arrived. William and Olivia's wedding would take place in the garden of the new headquarters of the Edward Thompson Foundation, a historic mansion in the heart of Chicago that had been restored to house both the office and educational programs. The decision to hold the ceremony there wasn't just practical, it was symbolic, representing how their personal and professional lives had become inseparably intertwined. Sophia, as the maid of honor, was helping Olivia with the final touches on her dress in one of the mansion's rooms. The freshly painted walls still carried the scent of new paint, mingling with the fragrance of the flowers that adorned the entire space. "I still can't believe I start my master's in 2 weeks," Sophia commented as she adjusted Olivia's veil. "And to think that a year ago, I didn't even dream of going to college." Olivia smiled, watching through the mirror the confident young woman Sophia had become. "Your research project on ethical financial management systems is already causing a buzz at the university. Your father would be proud." "Which one?" Sophia joked, her eyes sparkling. "Professor Johnson, who taught me to love numbers, William, who gave me a chance when I needed it most, or Edward, who, without even knowing me, paved the way for all of this?" Downstairs, William was talking to Anthony Torres in the office that once belonged to his father. The room retained much of its original decor, but now also displayed more recent photographs. The first graduating class of the foundation, the inauguration of the study center, special moments that told the story of a legacy in constant evolution. "Your father always said," Torres remarked, adjusting his tie, "that true success isn't measured by what we achieve for ourselves, but by what we build for others." Emily rushed in, carrying a folder that seemed out of place with her elegant party dress. "Mr. Williams, sorry to interrupt, but I thought you'd want to see this before the ceremony. The State University just approved our proposal for the outreach program." It was another significant achievement. The Foundation's financial education program would now be officially integrated into the curriculum of several colleges, multiplying its reach and impact. Isabella, who was coordinating the final preparations for the ceremony, passed by the door with a radiant expression. "You won't believe it. The international delegation that visited the project last month wants to implement our model in 3 different countries." Professor Johnson, who had arrived early for a special surprise, watched the commotion with a serene smile. In his hands, he held a newly published book, numbers that transformed the Edward Thompson methodology of ethical financial education. It was the result of decades of experience, combining his teaching methods with the principles he had learned from his old friend. Guests were beginning to arrive in the garden. Among them were various students and alumni of the foundation, business partners and colleagues of Olivia from the police station, all part of a community that had formed around this transformative work. As Olivia began her walk to the altar, set up under an old fig tree in the garden, William felt his heart overflow. By his side, as the best man, was Professor Johnson. Sophia, as the maid of honor next to Olivia, represented the perfect bridge between the past and the future they were building. During the ceremony, a gentle breeze swayed the leaves of the fig tree, creating a play of light and shadow that seemed to dance over the attendees. On the wall of the mansion, visible from where everyone stood, the portrait of Edward Thompson seemed to watch everything with approval. The Justice of the Peace, an elderly man with white hair who had known Edward in the early years of the office, conducted the ceremony with special emotion. Love, he said, like ethics, is not just an abstract concept. It is something built day by day with dedication, honesty, and care for others. As they exchanged rings, William and Olivia shared a look that said more than words. It wasn't just a personal union. It was the celebration of a shared purpose, a commitment to something greater than themselves. Sophia, observing the scene, felt her eyes fill with tears. In her bag, she carried the old notebook where she had made her first calculations on that stormy night, now a relic symbolizing the beginning of her transformation. Professor Johnson approached her discreetly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. You know, Sophia, sometimes numbers show us not just results but paths, and some calculations, like the one that brought us here today, result in endless possibilities for good. Isabella and Emily, together in a corner of the garden, exchanged knowing smiles. Their friendship had evolved into a powerful partnership, essential for the increasingly complex management of the Edward Thompson Foundation. The sun began to set, painting the sky of Chicago with shades of pink and gold as the celebration continued in the garden. It was more than a wedding. It was confirmation that when values, purpose, and love come together, the result is a force capable of transforming not just individual lives, but entire communities. It was a special morning at the mansion that housed the Edward Thompson Foundation. The place, which a year earlier was just an ambitious dream, now pulsed with life and purpose. In the spacious main hall, an exhibition celebrated the journey of transformation of the office and its impact on the community. Sophia, now a professor and coordinator of the financial education program, guided a group of international visitors through the exhibition. Her explanations flowed naturally, blending numbers and human stories with the same ease as breathing. This is the heart of our work, she explained, stopping in front of a panel displaying photographs of various graduating classes. Every number in our reports represents a transformed life, a dream realized, a community strengthened. William and Olivia, who had just returned from a conference in Washington, D.C., where they presented the Foundation's model, watched the scene with pride. The work that had begun in a small accounting office was now nationally recognized as a benchmark in financial education and business ethics. You know what's most impressive? Olivia commented, intertwining her fingers with William's. How every piece fell perfectly into place, as if your father had in some way foreseen all of this. Emily, who was passing by with a new stack of enrollment forms for the next cycle of courses, smiled at the comment. Mr. Edward always said that integrity is like compound interest. It grows exponentially when we invest in it consistently. Professor Johnson, who now divided his time between the orphanage and the foundation, was coordinating a meeting with educators from different regions of the country. His teaching method, combined with the ethical principles of Edward Thompson, had become a replicable model that was already being implemented in other institutions. The true mathematics of life, he explained to the educators, isn't just in the calculations, but in how we use numbers to build bridges between people and opportunities. Isabella entered the meeting room with exciting news. The cooperative of professionals that the firm had become was about to open its first branch in New York, bringing the model of ethical management and financial education to the largest city in the country. In the garden of the mansion, under the same fig tree where William and Olivia had gotten married, a new group of students had an outdoor class. Among them were young people from the orphanage, small business owners, public employees, a diverse mix of people united by the desire to learn and make a difference. Sophia approached the tree during a break, her fingers gently touching the trunk where a discreet plaque had been installed. "Here grow the dreams planted by Edward Thompson. Sometimes I wonder," she said to William, who had joined her, "if that storm was really just a coincidence. It feels like every moment, every decision brought us exactly where we needed to be." Anthony Torres, who had come for a meeting of the Foundation's advisory board, approached the group. "Edward always said that life is like a big ledger. Every debit has its credit, every action has its consequence. But he believed that when we invest in people, the returns are infinite." By late afternoon, as the sun set over Chicago, the team gathered in Edward's old office, now transformed into a space of memory and inspiration. The walls displayed not only his past achievements, but also the new chapters being written. 1 year, Olivia reflected, looking at the gathered group. In just 1 year, how many lives have been touched, how many stories rewritten? "And this is just the beginning," Sophia added, her eyes shining with the same determination that had brought her there. "Everyone who passes through here carries not just knowledge, but a mission." William looked at the portrait of his father on the wall, feeling deep gratitude. The legacy Edward had left was not just an office or a foundation. It was living proof that integrity, compassion, and excellence could walk together, turning numbers into instruments of social change. Professor Johnson raised his coffee cup in an impromptu toast. "To Edward Thompson," he proposed, "who taught us that the best calculations are those that add opportunities and multiply hopes." "And to the future," Isabella added, "that we build every day, one number, one dream, one life at a time." The last ray of sunlight for the day streamed through the mansion's windows, illuminating the gathered group. In the photo on the wall, Edward Thompson's serene smile seemed brighter than ever, as if approving each new chapter of this story that continued to be written, a story that proved that when numbers are guided by purpose and heart, their potential for transformation is truly infinite.